Hello everyone, Thursday the 18th of November. Years and years ago, a guy called Derek came up to me one day. I don't know what can't even remember what real context it was in. It was probably in Wakefield days, so that's going back a long time. And we must have been talking about change or something, because he said to me, Mark, there are two types of people. He said there are those who love change. He called them the mutaphobics, muta being changed, and the mutaphialics, I think he said, which is those who love change. So the ones who hate change are the ones who love change. His wife was standing near him and she laughed when she heard him saying this, because we all laughed actually, because Derek was one of the Eeyores. His glass was always half empty, and leaking. And he was always a bit negative, and he really hated change. I don't remember much else about that. Maybe it was just because we had a good laugh about it, and that's what stuck with me. But I guess the other thing that stuck with me is that we do handle change in different ways, don't we? Each one of us. Now, I think there's more to it than that. That there's people who hate change and love change. I think there's some of you who really know that you hate change, and you really know you love change. But there's a lot of people who are somewhere in amongst that, somewhere in the middle or somewhere along those kind of the spectrum of this. And I know that there's some people who would really love change, apart from the fact that something's happened in their lives that has affected their ability to handle change, and made them fear it. I know that there's all sorts of other subtleties and kind of to human beings around this, but maybe the point is that we all deal with change in different ways, and each of us is uniquely wired, and we need to keep trying to understand each other. I much prefer to talk about transition than change, but I think kind of change is it is a thing, and we are inevitably going through change, and we're going through change on a church level, a network level, on a culture level, on a national, international level. We are changing and being changed, and because it feels like a lot of it's forced on us, we don't, that feeling of not being able to choose change is a difficult one for many of us. There's all sorts of complex feelings and responses going on. So as a leader, I know that I'm having to handle all that and work out my responses to change as well as your responses to change, and actually feels like an impossible task. So I appeal to you to function with with an intention to have greater understanding of change and of what different people might be going through and how they may be handling the change that's happening, and also let's not stick our heads in the sand and say, well, I'm just going to ignore all this and it'll all pass, because, that's just not going to happen like that. Let's also not try and go back to what things were like before when there seemed to be less change, because those days are gone. You can't go back in that way. And bring it forward. That's not one of the options that we got in front of us. So I wanted to kind of highlight that and kind of challenge us around that. This week in morning prayers, we've been in Isaiah 7 and 8. It's great to continue to read together with read the Bible together with a group of people, in this kind of consistent way, and It's very challenging at times, but it's really good. In Isaiah 7 and 8, we see this guy called Ahaz, who's one of the bad kings. There's not a lot that he does right. In fact, the only thing maybe that he does right is that one of his son is a good king. And Ahaz is being threatened, so it's the kingdom of Judah, they're being threatened. And God comes to Ahaz through Isaiah, and he says to Ahaz, don't worry about it. They're just, smouldering stubs. They are nothing to be afraid of. The time of judgment upon Judah is not yet here. So trust me, don't worry about this threat that you're facing. And it's literally right outside the walls of Jerusalem. It's right outside. And sadly, Ahaz doesn't stand firm in his faith. He's been given, in a sense, faith, and he doesn't stand firm in it. Instead, he kind of doubles down into trying to sort it out himself, and he gets help from elsewhere, and he doesn't trust God. And then God says, well, Ahaz, ask for a sign. God's willing to give him a sign to help him to follow in God's way. And Ahaz stupidly refuses it. He refuses the sign. He says, I'm not going to put God to test. Well, God's offered him a sign and he refuses it. It's ridiculous. And God, through Isaiah, says, well, I'm going to give you a sign anyway. And then he gives him what we know as the sign of Emmanuel. So, it's peculiar in this. It's like, why give a sign that we associate with Jesus, who's Emmanuel, God with us? That's what Emmanuel means. All this time back there, and it's the function of near and far prophecy. So you get this kind of prophetic word that's for now and also for the future, and there's a combination of the two here, and I think it's like kind of God was saying to Ahaz, look, I am God with you now, and in the future I'm going to be God with you through Jesus. Now, of course, that's going to be long after Ahaz and all the people of that nation then are going to be around. But it's like, here's a promise for now and a promise for the future. And I've been very struck by that. Let's not refuse the sign that God gives us. The sign is Jesus. The sign is Jesus, who is God with us. He's Emmanuel. And the sign of Emmanuel, to live under the sign of Emmanuel, is that we remember this today, and we function in relation to Jesus today because he's God with us today. So that means that all God's resources and help and everything is for us today. We can live in that today. And also we can have a future expectation, and that's what really helps us with the whole thing of handling change, is that if we can have an eye on the future, we've got a future hope that God's going to be with me in the future. Because Jesus is in me, he's for me, and I'm for Jesus, then it's for now and the future. That helps us to navigate these times of change. Okay, so I want to encourage you today, don't refuse the sign of Emmanuel. The sign of Emmanuel is over your life. It's God is with you. And he's with you now and in the future. And encourage one another with this. Okay, it's not just my job to encourage you, it's your job to encourage each other. We all do this, don't we? Don't refuse the sign. Don't get caught up in the Ahaz responses where he basically ran away. He kind of went inside himself. As a sign on a parcel force van that I drove past once on the motorway said, a person who's wrapped up in himself makes a very small parcel. Well, Ahaz was a very small parcel. He wrapped up in himself, self-protective, refusing the help that was being offered. Don't be like that. Instead, together, let's encourage one another to live under the sign of Emmanuel.